and you are watching SCW, the wrestling channel here on YouTube.com. That's right, it is time for a brand new episode that we're going to put together for you today. It's called SCW Rewind. That's right, we're going to rewind, and today we're going all the way back to 1995, a special time in the wrestling industry, and we're going to be covering WCW, the debut of Monday Nitro, the first 2 episodes we're going to be talking about here today. My name is Steve, and I'm joined by George. George, how are you?
I'm very well. It's great to go back in the time warp based on the current climate. How are you today, Steve? All right?
Yeah, very good, very good. It's fun to just go back and just review some classic episodes of wrestling, and especially just to see what the industry was like at that time.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be an interesting discussion.
Definitely. Well, obviously, WCW at that point had been gaining some momentum for about a year. They'd got the likes of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage come in, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So a few of the classic names that were big in WWF at that time. It was WWF, not WWE. And they got to the stage where they had got this television deal. But they weren't doing so well at that point, were they, as a company in comparison to WWF? WWF was winning every week, wasn't they, George?
Yeah, it was pretty one-sided. I've got to admit, before the start of Nitro, I think everybody thought WCW were crazy to be going head-to-head with Raw. I think if you look at the people that they signed, the real turning point in essence was ultimately Hulk Hogan as a signing. I think that was a great addition. Bear in mind, Hulk Hogan, his last kind of run at that point was 93, where he'd obviously jobbed out to Yokozuna at the King of the Ring. I think sort of it was a great sign at that point. Hulk Hogan was clearly over with everybody still. He had his Thunder in Paradise, which fitted nicely with the whole TNT moniker as well. But no, it's a very interesting period. The fact that how the shows were built up and how they did eventually get such momentum to win 83 weeks of however many there was, I think it says it all really, doesn't it?
Certainly is, and there's a lot of star power as we go into Nitro. You mentioned we mentioned Hulk Hogan, we mentioned Randy Savage, but of course they had the Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, Sting, Vader. I mean, Vader doesn't stay around too long as we go in towards Nitro, but of course he was actually showcased on the first video package. You got the intro. He was one of 4 superstars there that was featured. Of course, Vader, Sting, Randy Savage, and Hulk Hogan were the 4 faces on that video package. And they did the first episode in the Mall of Minnesota, which I thought was a very interesting venue. What was your take on that?
Yeah, it was definitely interesting to do it at the shopping mall. I think it was it made it stand out. It fit the whole way the product was going, if that makes sense. I think with Eric Bischoff ultimately being in kind of control of the booking and stuff like that. Clearly he's from Minnesota, he knew the area well. It's a great move in my opinion. It stands out. It made it look a lot more fresh than kind of the old arenas of Monday Night Raw, which WWE were doing at that time.
Yes, certainly, and of course there's so many floors as well of people looking over the balconies and stuff. It gave it a really big feel, didn't it? It was something very special. And at that point, I guess they'd only recently done Bash at the Beach, which was a couple of months earlier, where they actually did the show on the beach, and there was thousands upon thousands of people watching that show on the beach. So they'd obviously tried to do things that were outside the box, like you say, different to WWF, different to Monday Night Raw, and it looked like for me that they succeeded. Well, the first show was on September 4th of 1995, and we said there that, of course, that they had the video package. It was in the Mall of Minnesota. They had also introduced the new commentary team, of course, at that point with a lot of the pay-per-views. We had Tony Schiavone and Bobby Heenan. We had Eric Bischoff as what to be the lead on the commentary, and he introduced Steve Mongo McMichael, who had just come from the NFL, who was going to be doing on the broadcasting. What was your take on that we had Mongo McMichael as a commentator?
It was an interesting addition. I would question sort of maybe why he was kind of there to a certain point. I think he was only really there maybe for Deborah McMichael down the line. I think they clearly wanted to do a similar thing to what WWE did with Sable. Like they didn't want to bring Mark Merrow in essence, just so they had Sable. I think the thing with Michael, he was kind of being tutelaged by Eric Bischoff. He had something to offer. It was something different, if that makes sense. But I kind of get it. He wasn't going to overshadow sort of Heenan and Bischoff, so it's a good move. I think the 3-man commentary team was fresh. I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite good.
It certainly was fresh at that time. We get it very common today, but back then it was something different, exciting, a new set of eyes that come from a different sport as well. It was very interesting to see that put onto the product. I mean, Bobby Heenan goes without saying, arguably the greatest commentator of all time. He always brings such flavour, doesn't he?
Yeah, what a legend he was. He was such a great legend, even sort of as a manager. And to bring that to the commentary booth, he was just entertaining.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, let's go straight into the action anyway. The first match in Nitro history. And what a match they put together for it as well. Jushin Thunder Liger was brought in for the evening and he took on Flying Brian Pillman. It was a great match, went on a number of minutes, just under the 10-minute mark, I believe. Jushin Thunder Liger goes for almost like a German suplex, it felt. And this was counted into some sort of roll-up. And Flying Brian picked up the victory. But it was a very high-flying, action-packed opener to the show. It almost felt sort of something of what you get today in today's current market, that high-flying style, fans on the edge of their seats, a lot of near falls as well. Was that sort of your take looking back at this? It was almost like looking at something you'd see in the modern day with these two.
It was a fantastic match. I think clearly it was a good eye-opener to what WCW were trying to build. I felt it was like a cruiserweight match. I felt that both wrestlers were so credible. Brian Pillman at that point was fantastic in the ring. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great way to open a different style of wrestling, if that makes sense. I think it clearly made people stand up compared to what they had seen previously in WCW.
Definitely. And of course, I know Jushin Thunder Liger has previous history in WCW, especially in the very, very early 90s. But to bring someone like him in there, when you've got this television deal and you want to stand out, of course, he's come from New Japan Pro Wrestling, but his look alone, he really stands out from the crowd. He's someone that's going to put your eyeballs on the television screen. Yeah,
definitely. I think he's sort of the whole intro, the whole way that he sort of connects with the crowd. He may not be the best on the microphone. He may not need to, because the in-ring action at that point in 95, it was fresh, man. I think if you compare it to sort of what WF was serving at that time, when you had such people as Jean-Pierre Lafitte and other people like that were a bit sluggish, shall we say? I don't know if that's a fair statement. No, it was a great opener. I think it was very ECW-esque for me. I think it felt that there was a great clash of styles there. Clearly, Pillman and Liger did a good job of getting the crowd warmed up as well.
Definitely. Not to be controversial, but it felt raw, didn't it? It felt really sort of edgy, a fun product to watch. So, yeah, it was a great opener to that show. We did actually get after that, Sting had words for Ric Flair because they were due for a match that was going to be coming up next. But we got a promo, which I really wanted to talk about, which took place in the mall. Pasta Mania, Hulk Hogan, talking about a pasta dish named for him on that show. What were your thoughts on this? I just thought this was a bit of a bonkers interview that perhaps wasn't necessarily needed.
Yeah, when you've got kind of a pay-per-view like 2 weeks later, I think it was not a great move. The fact they didn't use this sort of time to build up anything, it just, other than put Hulk Hogan's merchandise over, it was a fun moment, but yeah, it was pretty unnecessary. Considering what they'd done before, it kind of was just a waste of a segment, I felt.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the only thing that come of benefit there was Bischoff really had to fight to get through to get that interview with Hogan. It just showed his popularity, which I would say is one thing in a positive. But definitely a positive for any show. If you want to kick off a show in the mid-90s, definitely one match you want to have on there was Sting versus Ric Flair, which was our next encounter. What's your thoughts when you just think this is the first show of Nitro and we're getting two of the best in WCW history going one-on-one? And let's not take away the fact that Ric Flair at this point, 11-time world champion, Sting, a former 5-time world champion and current United States champion.
Wow, what a match to kind of basically open up Nitro, the second match of the night. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. The standard they was serving, I think it was pretty unseen at that time to have these two main eventers at that point to basically just be sort of so low on the card, if that makes sense. But no, it was a really good, I felt like it had a big feel. I felt that it really set the tone that Nitro was going to have big matches to a certain point. But no, it was a really good match. I really liked what it did. It clearly built what it needed in terms of the Arn Anderson Ric Flair feud, I think that was kind of interesting. I really liked what they did. I think, although they only got about 11 minutes, so I thought the 11 minutes kept me entertained. I was quite excited by it, really.
Yeah, definitely. Well, for a Nitro, I mean, like, obviously it's not a pay-per-view length, and the show, if you take the adverts out of it, it's only 45 minutes long, so it gets a 25% portion of the show, which, I mean, for a television match is more than worthy. And I mean, the thing is, we have to even cover the start of the match. The two guys are about to compete, and who none other walks down the aisle than one Lex Luger. I mean, Lex Luger, of course, had only wrestled for WWF, if I'm not mistaken, just a couple of days earlier, had finished his contract and made this shock debut or re-debut on WCW. I mean, what's your thoughts when you saw this? This seemed like a big step and statement of what the Monday Night Wars was to bring further down the line.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think the thing is, it was such a shock. Like, they did such a good job of keeping it secret. The fact you had Lex Luger previously, about 2 weeks earlier, he even had a match announced in WWF against Hunter Hearst Helmsley at the In Your House event that was going to take place. The fact that he turned up, there was a shock value. I think it made sense in the fact that Lex Luger had a lot more of a namesake in WCW. Clearly in the 90s, he was a world champion. I felt it was good. I think it really set a tone that you didn't know what was coming next. And Lex Luger, man, it was good. Let's be fair, his WWF run wasn't particularly that great, so I think it was a wise move. And apparently, like Lex Luger was only really signed as a favour to Sting, according to Eric Bischoff, which it's interesting to see. I think it set the tone of what was to come. Really, I really enjoyed the cameo. Really, I thought it was like a moment of like. If you take yourself back to that time, you would have been shocked because it was so secretive. Not even the dirt sheets really knew that he was going to be there.
No, and I think that's always the best moments within entertainment and within wrestling when you see that the real shock value, and arguably, like you say, more of a big name for WCW. But I mean, WWF had tried to make him the next Hulk Hogan. Of course, it kind of failed in that experiment. But you still feel that was just a slap in the face for Vince McMahon at that point.
Yeah, definitely. I think the fact that Lex supposedly gave his word to Vince, and then he's there at the first opportunity to obviously basically hit Vince, if that makes sense. I think it was a shock. I think the fact that you're looking at kind of the timing of it as well. The only way I could compare it for the, sort of the younger viewers that may be watching that are not really aware of where Lex Luger was at that point, the equivalent really would be, I would say it's almost like potentially like a Seth Rollins coming to AEW. I think it would have that sort of impact. It's somebody that used to be at the top, it's not quite at the top, and basically that the company want to keep, that they can't keep hold of.
Definitely. You could even argue it has a bit of a Roman Reigns feel. I mean, WWE pushed through with Roman Reigns, but I mean, it almost feels like you could argue that it was an experiment they were really trying to push for. It was the guy they wanted and just didn't quite get it through. But I think Seth Rollins is a great analogy because, like you say, he is the guy right now that's probably the upper mid-card guy, where this time last year he was the guy they were trying to push in the main event and perhaps just didn't work as Universal Champion at that point. So, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show what a level and what a coup to get at that point. You went to say there about the match there and it delivered what it needed to give the result for everybody. Of course, it kind of was like a disqualification. Ric Flair had a figure four leg lock on Sting, refused to release it, had his hands like on the ropes and that, and would just not release it. Eventually, Arn Anderson comes in as the bell was ringing, and you see the brawl between them two, building towards full brawl because at that point the Four Horsemen sort of stable wasn't together. So Arn Anderson, Ric Flair were building towards what would be a classic match later on at Full Brawl. For you, this did tick all the boxes.
Yeah, it did what it needed to do. I think the fact that you're teasing the sort of future match, it makes you want to buy the pay-per-view, which is exactly what it does. And the fact that neither of the wrestlers lost, I think the fact that you went to a DQ finish, that's sensible. You're not burying somebody because you're going to need Sting and Ric Flair to maintain their kind of overness to a certain point.
Such an amazing point. Like you say, you want to make sure that those big names have got that big fight feel, and they go in and not on the first show that they both lose. You've got that big match, and no one comes out empty-handed at the end of it. Yeah, I agree with you. Complete great booking move for you there. But I mean, it was just a lot of shocks, twists, and turns throughout the whole show. I found it very interesting as that segment was finishing. We found none other than a superstar trying to fight Mongo McMichael at the commentary table, none other than Scott Norton returning to WCW and trying to get himself in there. It was obviously Heenan sort of made a runner for it. We had Eric Bischoff in between, officials trying to break it up. Randy Savage comes out to make the save, and we almost get a fight between these two. Eric Bischoff then having to scream at Scott Norton not to get in the ring, not to make a match now because of the fact that if he does, then he's never going to ever compete in WCW. This just really had that sort of pull-apart kind of vibe about it, was fresh for the 90s, and really had that excitement feel that anything could happen. Did you get that vibe?
Yeah, it was intense. I think the good thing about it is they were clearly building stuff for next week, which is a vital thing. You want to keep people watching next week. So it was good. It was a good way to bring Scott Norton back. The fact you got Randy Savage being there, I think that instantly gives Scott Norton a rub up the card. It makes him seem important, which is good. But no, it was fresh. But it felt to me, to be honest, it felt slightly flat after we had Luger. I think I would have rather that they sort of delayed the Luger thing to later than Norton. I think Norton should have come first.
Yeah, well, fair play. I mean, what sort of feeling did it have at the time with Scott Norton coming in? Because he'd done a lot of work in Japan, hadn't he?
I've got to be honest, for kind of me, at that point, based on the coverage we got in our country, I live in the United Kingdom. Steve obviously lives somewhere else. At that time, we both lived in the United Kingdom. We didn't really have WCW coverage to know who Scott Norton was. I think Scott Norton, to most mainstream fans, he wouldn't have been somebody that I would have recognised or known off the top of my head. I've got to be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I had no idea of Scott Norton, and I mean, at this point for me, didn't, like you say, didn't have the coverage to keep up with WCW at that point. I think I watched WCW. It was on like the Saturday night shows were on ITV in 92, 93. Then we had sort of like a disappearing act for WCW where we couldn't find it for a number of years. I think the next time I had the opportunity where I could NWO had just about started, and that was the next time I would tune in. So like you say, for me, there would not be much opportunity. We didn't have like what we do today, where we have the chance to check out Japan and stuff like that. So I mean, my knowledge of Norton at that point was not very great either at that point. So for me, it was nothing. He looked like he wanted to have a fight, and he looked physical. So for me, he looked like he was someone that could pose a threat at some point later down the line. So it is exciting, despite the fact that maybe I wouldn't know much about him then, but also looking and knowing who I know him and about him now, it is interesting, more exciting seeing that this is the point he enters in. We get two video packages as well of two debuting superstars the following, due for episode 2 of Nitro. Sabu was the first one from ECW. What's your take on this?
I hated the package. I love the sort of the artistic view of Sabu a little bit, but that Sabu package I felt it looked very cheap to me. It looked choppy. The action wasn't really still. The picture kind of distorted. I think it doesn't really show. It shows that he goes through tables. It doesn't really show much of the character. I felt, me personally, I didn't really think it was that much of a good vignette, if I'm being honest.
No, I have the same argument for you there, and I can also feel that. I don't know. It just kind of felt to me that from the minute go with Sabu, and I know he doesn't end up having the greatest run on his run in WCW, but I don't know. It just. Although they wanted to be edgy and this is where the big boys play and we're going to bring you something different, it just felt at that time that I don't think people were quite ready for this. For me, it just felt, for what they were looking to bring with the likes of Luger in and with the likes of Scott Norton, I kind of got an idea of what the vision was going forward. Sabu is a break of that vision. He's a different type of character. And I know they've had previous hardcore style wrestlers like Cactus Jack, who was in the early 90s. But I just wasn't sure at that time if Sabu was going to be the family-friendly face of a company. Just didn't know if it was going to be a fit for me. But definitely seeing this guy going through tables, and obviously at this point of me knowing what Sabu's career is like, very excited to see what he would bring to the table within WCW. Of course, the other character that was brought in, of course, was Mike Rotunda. For those who are unaware, that is the father of Bray Wyatt and Bo Dallas, who, of course, was in WWF as Owen R. Shyster at one point. It was Mike Rotunda in the mid-80s as a tag team champion at WrestleMania 1. And, of course, it had his run in WCW as well as Mike Rotunda. Coming back at this point as Michael Wall Street. He's had quite a few gimmicks through the years in WCW. And this one here seems to be almost a take on of the $1 Million Man and almost a push at the IRS, because I think he even makes a comment of IRS during his video package. What were your takes of Michael Wall Street?
I enjoyed it. I thought it was a funny promo. There's some early digs at WWE as well at the time. You got the whole new generation is few generation. I thought that was a clever one-liner. Clearly, as we're older, I can look back at that and I find that enjoyable. I like the IRS comment. I felt it was good. I did feel it was a bit like a $1 Million Man knockoff to a certain point, but it's enjoyable. I think at the time you've got to look at this. You've got to try new stuff. I think the fact that WCW are clearly hyping that there's new wrestlers coming in, I think it makes it exciting. They're filling a lot. It's in the show's only 45 minutes. You're getting a lot in that 45 minutes so far.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 18 minutes long, and we've not hit the main event yet, and it just shows there was so much in this show that was one thing after another, and you had to take notice of everything that was going on. So from that standpoint, it was a really great opener. I do agree with it was a fun video package. I really enjoyed it in that respect with Michael Wall Street. I will say, though, at this point for me, he was not a main eventer. I knew he wasn't going to be a main eventer coming in. So a bit of me, I wouldn't say disappointment is the word I'm looking for, because back at that time, you would turn around and say, well, he's someone that's coming from WWF, someone that has the history and stuff of being in the company. But I just felt that this guy was never going to be above a television champion level. So for me, it was good to see someone brought in, but for me, it didn't feel like it was going to make or break it wasn't going to make a big deal in the company weeks going forward. But certainly was fun to watch nonetheless. We'll go on then to the main event, which I think was also great for television, a great way to put out to your audience. You want to put your world champion in the first main event. You had Hulk Hogan against Big Bubba Rogers, of course, for those who are unfamiliar, the Big Boss Man, who was Big Bubba in the 80s, I believe 1987, amongst the NWA at that point before joining WWF, I believe was in 1989, if I'm not mistaken. Could be 88. Memory's a little bit fuzzy at this moment, but certainly a household name for both people. For audiences watching in, people would recognise both superstars. So, and Big Bubba at that point was not a main eventer, was somewhere in that middle area of the card. I was certainly up, mid to up card. He was sort of that before main event level. So it was a good place to have him in to come and do the job to Hogan. So I think it kind of delivered what he needed to. Would you feel the same?
Yeah, it was an okay, I'd say, main event. You do have to have your champion. I agree with you at that point. I think it's a sensible move. Hulk Hogan's the most valuable commodity, so it makes sense having Big Bubba Rogers. I think Hogan went against him ultimately because he trusted him. I think it makes sense to go against somebody you trust in the ring. It was weird. I always felt like it was watching SummerSlam 1990 or something like that. I felt it was like 5 years on. It was a bit odd to see the Big Boss Man there, but it does make sense. It done what it needed. I think the in-ring action was a bit sort of precarious, to say the least. I didn't think it was particularly outstanding, but it's fine. It makes sense. What they kind of did after, I think it's sensible. I think you don't want to have sort of Hulk Hogan against Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan against Sting. You don't want to throw away your best match. You've already given away sort of two of your best wrestlers, sort of the second match in the card. So I think it's a sensible move, and it does what it needs to do ultimately with the ending of the show.
Certainly, I agree with every point you made there. I mean, yeah, it's definitely the weakest match of all three on the card. But like you say, you're putting over your champion, you're showing him off. He's going over somebody who, it's not going to harm too much in the pecking order. You're not giving away the biggest matches. And you've already showcased so much of your big talent within this first show. But like you say there, we do get, of course, the build towards Fall Brawl at the end of this show. Perhaps a shame we didn't get it all through the show, as the pay-per-view is only 2 weeks away. But we do see the Dungeon of Doom coming to attack Hogan. What are your thoughts on the Dungeon of Doom?
They're like a poor man's Dark Order. I'm sorry to say it. They are a who's who of who's bad in WWF. It's almost like you've got sort of Earthquake. He was a fantastic tag wrestler, not a very good singles wrestler. You got Bruce the Bar Beefcake in the gimmick of Zodiac. Yeah, not good. That was a bit awful. And then you got Haku as Min. Another 90s WWF wrestler that didn't really do anything. And you just look at Ken Sullivan. Ken Sullivan was excellent in terms of his role of motivating this group. But you look at who they're against, and you just generally think, well, this Dungeon of Doom stable, they don't have anybody that's of that upper echelon on the card up to be able to sort of go toe-to-toe. It's almost like you're booking them as a comedy act, if that makes sense. And clearly in the coming months, I don't want to spoil maybe future shows, that when you see like sort of who's leading the Dungeon of Doom other than Kevin Sullivan, it does become quite laughable.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, Kamala in the stable as well is not the guy you're referring to. Like you say, there's a lot of failed wrestlers from that time, and a lot of face paint, a lot of just wacky, wacky gimmicks. Yeah, it's just bonkers to put it plain and simple. But at this point, they needed to build a War Games match. This was the stable that was after Hogan at the time. I think it's classic mid-90s wrestling, just before everything gets really good. If we go down that angle, really. WWF was not probably its strongest point in 1995, the World Wrestling Federation. WCW was having an interesting year with regards to their talent before they bring in a lot of these fresh faces. And, you go with the mention of Ming there. I mean, Ming was actually quite a strong guy in Colonel Parker's stable not long before. So it's a very random jump if you're not watching the weekly Saturday nights. If you're going from pay-per-view to Nitro, you almost miss, which, for me, I did watching through the network because I don't have the access to the Saturday nights. It's very strange how we just all of a sudden turns up in the Dungeon of Doom. So, but yeah, I mean, we get the save from Lex Luger here, and then, of course, eventually we get Sting and Randy Savage come down as well. It's interesting that Luger makes the save. Of course, Luger kind of feels in the wrong for Vader. Vader was supposed to be in this match, but of course, the rumours backstage had said that Vader at this point had gone AWOL. Was the comments on commentary? He's believed to have had, I believe, a backstage fight with Paul Orndorff, which got him fired from the company, which of course later led Vader to go to WWF at that point. But do you think that it's like for like in name value? Luger for WCW is almost as strong putting in as Vader.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with exactly what you said. I think the fact that they slotted Luger in at such a critical point in the show, again, it was clever moving. And the fact that it was Vader, you are right what you said, Vader, and obviously Orndorff did have a fight. Paul Orndorff was obviously a road agent at that point in the promotion. And clearly they had a bad fallout. Apparently pawned off Death Vader with one hand, supposedly, which is crazy if you think about it. But no, this is probably, we don't really see much of Vader kind of going forward, if that makes sense. It makes sense with Luger though. But I did like what they did with the finish. The fact that you're building something for next week, you're teasing who they can trust. Hulk Hogan versus Lex Luger next week. That's a pay-per-view caliber match back in that time. It's almost the equivalent now of saying on next week's Raw you're going to book almost like you're going to book Brock Lesnar facing the Fiend or something. It's almost that equivalent. You're going to have the two of the most over stars head-to-head on next week's pay-per-view, which is giving you a reason to watch next week.
It certainly is. And one thing I really like about it, because like we said, we don't get the trust there with Hogan and Luger at that point. Hogan's almost, what are you doing here? Luger's got to explain that this is where the big boys play, and he's come for the championship. He wants something. Look, you haven't got to wait, next month or next year. Let's do it next week, Monday Nitro, and the match is set. We get told as well about the match being set for Randy Savage and Scott Norton. So we've already built things on this show for going forward for next week. But one thing I really like about the Hogan-Luger match, the stuff you said there, how it equates to today, one thing it equates to then as well, which is really, for me, is quite amusing, is you've got Hulk Hogan, Vince's guy, for like the first 8 years of WrestleManias, versus the guy that was supposed to be the guy that took over Hogan. It's almost a massive slap in the face of all the booking they've done for 10 years worth WWF at that point. And I really sort of like the way that was put together. It just shows that, to put it politely, WCW at this point had balls. They were going head to head, and this was going to be a war. And I think it was a great show that was put together. How would you summarize this first episode of Monday Night Show?
It did exactly what I needed. It created exactly what Nitro was going to be. It was exciting. It was unpredictable. It left people talking. Obviously, at that point, if you look around the industry, look around the dirt sheets at that time, the feedback from the shows were pretty phenomenal, if that makes sense. I think WWE knew they were kind of in trouble with the opening. I think the only thing I thought probably at the time, or in hindsight, is how they can maintain this. Obviously, this is quite a big first week. I felt sort of the second week, what are they going to do to try and top this? I felt it was sort of a massive sort of eye-opening show, if that makes sense, to what WCW was going to become.
It definitely was. But let's go on to week number 2. It was actually in my and we started off, of course, we had some of the debuts. We saw the video packages of people that were going to be here this week. We had Sabu that was going to be in action. We also had what would later be VK Wall Street, not Michael Wall Street. We got those debuts as well. So we kicked off the show, Sabu versus Alex Wright. A match I thought was okay. We got sort of quite an innovative move from the top rope where Sabu almost, it wasn't head scissors, but it was kind of like the body kind of flips Alex Wright over. Then got himself the 1-2-3. But Sabu, being as violent as he is, a man that's uncontrollable, had to put Alex Wright through a table afterwards to really sort of give that extreme edge over. Definitely an edgier product than what obviously WWF, World Wrestling Federation, was putting over at that time. But the referee then reversed his decision and gave the victory by disqualification to Alex Wright. I thought that this was a bit bonkers. I don't know what your thought was with this.
Yeah, it was a watered-down ECW match, I felt, with Sabu. A couple of key things I wasn't too impressed with. The fact that you're having Sabu not get the win here. I think Sabu's debuting. He needs to get a win to sort of look strong to a certain point. And I think the fact that this match ended, yet you don't get a mention of Sabu throughout the rest of the show, I think that was, to me, I just felt that was a glaring error. But the match was exciting to a certain point, but it was rushed. I felt for the time they had, they didn't really get time to be able to tell a story in the ring to a certain point.
No, it felt like it was just a quick television match, just to show off Sabu what he perhaps can do in the ring a little bit with his major movesets, really. Alex Wright at that point, I mean, that's Wonder Kid. He was really over in '94 when he was first brought in and was winning a lot of matches for a long time. But it seems at this point that Alex Wright started to go on his losing streak a little bit. He wasn't as prominent on the card. It felt that he was going to be the guy at one point, but then once he lost his, I believe it was a United States Championship match, or no, maybe Television Championship match. He lost to Arn Anderson at a pay-per-view in the summer. He was then starting to lose matches week in, week out, it felt at this point. So, I mean, for him to get the win by DQ, I mean, I don't think it would have hurt for Alex Wright to have lost here. And like you say, a debut Sabu not picking up the victory, it's just not a good omen in my point for going forward. If you want to have these new faces in, are they there to put over the talent we've already got, or are they meant to be new, exciting people that are going to, take a lead in the company? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think the fact that they're not almost trusting Sabu from the get-go to sort of progress up the card. The DQ thing's okay, and the fact that he wasn't pinned, I get that part. But yeah, it just kind of was a bit odd, really. The fact that you got Sabu debuting. You've only given him 1 week's vignette from what I understand as well. It just seems to be crazy to throw him out here just randomly with no build.
Yeah, especially when you've got so many superstars that you had on offer to throw for the public that have been working within WCW for such a long time. We moved on to, and at least we've got also a follow-on from last week. Ric Flair having a interview with Mean Gene Okerlund in the ring, discussing Arn Anderson and their match that will be taking place at Full Brawl, and he says outright that he's going to kick Arn Anderson's ass, which I think was quite edgy for that time and that period as well. What were your thoughts of this interview with Ric Flair?
Yeah, it was okay. I think it did what it needed to do. I think it kind of went on a bit. It was very long. I felt it took up quite a large portion of the show, but it was okay. I think it sort of further builds a feud, really.
It certainly did. We had Sting versus VK Wall Street then next. Give us your thoughts as we go through onto this match. Give us all the details.
It was, okay. It was a bit of a strange match. Like, you've got Sting week 1 facing Ric Flair. You're then putting him against VK Wall Street. It was okay. I felt the fact you're trying to build VK Wall Street back. He's obviously got a name change here as well within a week, which is just crazy to me. But you have to get Sting. It makes it Sting was never going to lose. I don't know why they kind of done this. It's almost like a jobber match of Sting. But the fact that you got Sting with this United States title, to me, is surprising. I think Sting at that point would have more of a belt. But it was an okay match, mate. I thought it was okay. They did what they needed to do to a certain point. But it was just really nothing special, I've got to be honest with you.
No, it wasn't. And again, another debut, another loss, and which is not good if you're wanting to build those people up. So it's something of a minor from my perspective. But and it also told me straight away that Wall Street is not going to be a big name in WCW. He's not going to be someone that's going to push himself up the ladder and up that card. So it's
sorry to interrupt.
Go on, George.
Last point. Sorry to interrupt you. Clearly with that, he's obviously had the name change. He's gone from Michael Wall Street to VK. So what I did like, I will say to a certain point, is he's gone to Vincent Kennedy. It's like within week 2. That shows you that they're starting to really feud with WWF to a certain point.
Certainly. Well, it's actually where I was going to go. It's a nice segue to where it was going to be, because there was actually, as the entrances were made into this match, Eric Bischoff quite clearly on the show saying, don't tune into the other channel. It's 3 weeks old recorded. Shawn Michaels wins. He super kicks the big guy, probably Big Loser or something like that, but I can't remember word for word, but definitely the big guy for the 1, 2, 3. 3 weeks old. We're starting to get those digs in nice and early. Week 2, don't bother. This is the show to watch. Does this give this the feeling to you that this is where the big boys play, or is this trick just a bit dirty for your liking?
It's a dirty trick. I think you've got to kind of look at it. WCW needs to do whatever they can to try and get momentum. And when you say that comment, he just shows the big guy. When you look down the line, many months later, look who comes in. It's really weird, isn't it?
It certainly is. Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, a lot of the time as well, I think it's been emphasised in those first couple of episodes with Lex Luger suggesting as well that all these guys are just young guys, that they're not the big main eventers, and that's the purpose of being there, is where the big boys play, and these Hogans and Savages are the mainstream superstars that everyone should be checking out. So it is interesting, and certainly is indeed. But it certainly was an interesting little comment that was made from Bischoff. I agree with it. It's a bit dirty, it's a bit naughty, but at the same time, I don't know, I kind of liked it. It throws, fuel on the fire, doesn't it? It really sets off the war, nice pace, nice and early. But next match we've got Randy Savage, the Macho Man, taking on Scott Norton as promised. Another weird match, a bit too quick for my liking, and another debut loss. I don't quite understand why all these guys coming in are all losing. So for me, it's a little bit more negative this week on this Nitro, and especially with the manner of how Scott Norton loses. Now, I know you're perhaps trying to protect him here, but we've got Shark of the Dungeon of Doom that comes out, who wants to interfere in this match and get to Savage. It doesn't quite work out. He ends up falling on top of Norton's legs, who's already on the floor. The big elbow drop off the top rope, and the 1, 2, 3 where Scott Norton unable to kick out. It's a bit bonkers for my liking. I don't know what your thoughts are, George.
Yeah, it was doolally booking. I think you look at this, they made the Dungeon of Doom look like the most biggest joke of main eventers ever of a group of wrestling. I just felt it was comedy, really. The fact you're building Norton, I understand why he couldn't beat Randy Savage. It totally makes sense, but it was an okay match. I just question where Scott Norton would go next. Basically, I think it was okay. You got Dungeon of Doom again, which you have to do because obviously they're going to be in the main event on the next pay-per-view. I get that. But it was weird. It was rushed again. I think because of the time limit again, because you gave so long to the Ric Flair promo early on the show. you're rushing through here. You're throwing away matches you built up quite cleverly last week with no real time to really tell a story again.
Yeah, I think that's the negative there. I mean, of course, like you say, it's not such a change in your debut, but at the same time, you just feel like these people coming in, would you not want to build them up for a couple of weeks first before they go into these big matches? You know, you could actually build that match over a month, and then you need to go and see it at the pay-per-view. Norton could be going over the likes of people like Marcus Bagwell, or, you know, you could even look and say like Alex Wright at that point and pushing towards the pay-per-view, and then it would be Savage against him maybe in a month down the line. But that wasn't how it was booked. It wasn't how it was done. And of course, they were looking to build towards Fall Brawl, which is what they need to do. You know, Savage was in that Fall Brawl, so, you know, they need to give you a reason to want to watch that pay-per-view. So perhaps there is some method into the madness, even if it is a little bit wacky in places. We did also then get the main event, which of course was the championship match, Hulk Hogan against Lex Luger. Not given so much time, almost a bit of a no contest. But interestingly, the Dungeon of Doom come in once again to attack Hulk Hogan, but they don't attack Lex Luger. What's your thoughts on this?
You're creating basically an interesting sort of element of sort of, can you trust Lex Luger? Can you trust them? Which is fine. I get that. The Dungeon of Doom at that point, so on paper, they're not in the same league. It's almost like an FA Cup game of Manchester United facing, I don't know, Dagenham and Redbridge. It's that equivalent. It's the stables in football terms are just that far apart in terms of where they should be in the card. But it's an interesting little tease. I like the way they kind of did that. It makes you want to have to watch the pay-per-view, because on paper you're not going to really think this match could go any other way other than the baby faces and the good guys winning. But I quite liked it. I thought it was all right. I felt the match was a bit rushed again, but it made sense that they did the whole DQ. Obviously, you're not getting Lex Luger beat here, which is sensible. Hulk Hogan did his comeback, which he always does. But no, it was okay. I just think you've got to sort of give WCW some credit. The way they're able to slot Lex Luger into this sort of main event of War Games, considering what happened earlier with Vader, they've done it really quickly. And I think the fact that you've sort of got the show ended, you're giving them sort of tease, again, a reason to watch the pay-per-view. I liked it. The only thing I didn't really like with this was there's no real build for next week on Nitro. You haven't got that hook for sort of, I have to watch next week's Nitro. In my
no, it felt like now it's just the pay-per-view, and then hopefully, I suppose, the pay-per-view to put you next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly was interesting. Of course, we got Mean Gene back in the ring afterwards, and it seemed to be a little bit heated with the baby faces. Randy Savage not trusting Luger. Why did they not attack Lex Luger? Like you said, that trust element there. Sting says, "Look, we need a fourth guy in there. We can't go in." And Savage says, "No, I'm happy to go in 3 versus 4. I know where I stand. I know I'm not going to get double crossed on." Eventually, Hogan kind of makes the ultimate decision. Says, "Look, What do you want? What is your purpose here?" Luger says, "Look, I just want a title match. That's what it is." Savage says, "Look, I know he had a hidden agenda here, but he says, look, I'm on your team if you want to have me." And eventually it gets agreed that these are the 4 that we go into Full Brawl. We've already sort of covered there the role that Luger has there, but it certainly was, again, a bit heated, and you sort of feel like there is perhaps something later down the line there for Luger in the championship picture, but obviously it's not going to be settled on this Nitro. Before we close off and just give our final thoughts on the show, I mean, it was our first time we got to see the Nitro set. What did you think of that set?
It was interesting. It was different. It stood out. I think it clearly gives it a brand. It gives it its own identity, which I felt was good. I thought it was all right. I thought it was a good set.
I like the set for Nitro. I always have. And with the big WCW letters, I always find that intriguing. And, of course, as well with like the orange and black kind of vibe that seems to be, and silver kind of for the logo and that. Yeah, I like it. It's pretty cool. The whole setting and that, it's... I think, to be honest, it was ahead of its time, I personally, if I'm being brutally honest. I feel that... WWF at that point didn't have that sort of entrance, and it wasn't so long till they introduced the Titantron, not so far down the line. I think it was like a year or 2 later. So yeah, I mean, for me, I do think that at that point that set was very interesting. But overall, your thoughts of that second Nitro?
Yeah, it was okay. I think I'll give you the fact that they are going into a pay-per-view. I kind of get that's the most important thing. They weren't against WWE Live, which obviously is a massive thing. I think the fact that there's a lot of pot shots that have been called on the show, you can tell instantly stuff's heating up. I think the fact that you got Bischoff on commentary saying that about Lex Luger being at WWF 9 days ago, now he's with the big boys and all this lot, I think it was okay. I just think I'm just interested to see what they're going to do after the pay-per-view. I've only seen half of the pay-per-view so far, which we'll probably cover in another episode. But yeah, it's just interesting. Interesting what they're going to do on week 3. I haven't seen week 3 yet, so I'm looking forward to kind of seeing.
It certainly is interesting. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. And we will continue to cover stuff here on SCW. If the fan interest is there, guys, if you do like it, do give us the thumbs up. I agree with George. I think it's great to cover. We can cover Full Brawl. We can continue to cover Nitro. We can even cover other pay-per-views if that's of interest of people. Just let us know in the comments, and we will try and get more of these episodes put together. But I agree with you, George. I think overall, on a positive for that episode of Nitro, I mean, there was some good moments from it. They built towards the pay-per-view, which is something they need to do. There was always promise of more superstars that will be coming in. It's not just here. They always advertise the other shows, Saturday night, main event as well. That there's more shows to watch with Nitro as well at that point. So, yeah, I mean, there are some things going for it. I do think some of the booking is a bit bonkers, but, I mean, as a lot of fans are well aware when we're doing retro stuff, we can happily talk about the way forward. We know things are going to get serious over the next 12 months in WCW. And of course, they eventually get the birth of NWO, and then from that point onwards, I mean, goodness, that's where the tide really turns. And I'm sure at some stage down the line, we'll have a chance where we can talk about that. But just as a finalisation, George, before we go, is there anything you wish to discuss?
No, I think it's been a very interesting discussion. I've appreciated discussion with you, Steve. I think it's great to look back through older eyes now with WCW and be able to just look at it and just really take it all in. The fact the show length is sort of 45 minutes is refreshing to me. I think kind of compared to current product where it's 2 hours long, 45 minutes was fun. I enjoyed it. I felt it was really made me reminisce because all the old stars when I was a kid growing up and seeing them sort of now. I just think it's great to see what they do. I think what would be quite an interesting comparison is maybe on our next episode we can just potentially briefly mention sort of what WWF were doing at the time against WCW, just to see sort of how that compares, how WWF kind of had to try far back to a certain point.
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly did. They had, a lot of things went against their momentum, so it did take a lot to get back into the swing of things. But no, I mean, I kind of feel the same as you. I mean, comparing that to the current product, I mean, Raw being 3 hours long as well, it's such a difference. And of course, Nitro at one point did go to a 3 hour slot. It just goes to show that sometimes less is more because so much is fitting in this quick period of 45 minutes to watch. Of course, an hour with advertisements as well. Do you feel that just before we leave, the NXT is kind of course, it's still a great show, but do you feel that it's kind of lost a bit of its buzz because of the fact that at that point that was a 1 hour show and now it's doubling every single week?
It depends. I think the good thing with NXT is you are ultimately giving a platform for another style of wrestling, if that makes sense. It depends. I think 2 hours for a show is fine. I think it's when you're starting to go to 3 hours onwards, which is kind of maybe a lot of people these days just don't have time for 3 hours. But I think it's going to be great. I think particularly when Nitro goes to 2 hours, it'll be interesting to see whether we still think the quality of the shows is as strong.
Yeah, certainly. I'm interested and excited to see where it gets to that point. So, yeah, very much looking forward to it. But, yeah, guys, if you like it, then please check out, other content on the channel. We've got previous podcasts that we've done before for me and George. You can go and scroll through and find those out for us now. And as well as that, Ask SCW, the brand new episode number 28 is up and available for you right now. That was posted on Saturday, so make sure to go and check that out. And, yeah, we'll be back with you very, very soon. Just like, share, subscribe, support the channel. You can also follow us on Twitter as well. I'm on Twitter, SCW Wrestling Channel at SCW_Steve. You can go and follow me right now. And SCW, the Wrestling Channel, is also with that name available on Facebook and Instagram. So that's all from us. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thank you for watching SCW, the Wrestling Channel, here on YouTube.com. This has been SCW Rewind.